Hello, welcome to another video. Please like, share and subscribe for more amazing story. True God in Another Worlds, Tensura x Tbate, by Tempest_King_20. Chapter 59. The beginning. Lena Pav. The ancient stone walls of the Academy's west wing loomed over us, their rough surface cool beneath my fingertips. I traced the grooves absent-mindedly, my mind a whirlwind of worry and regret. The corridor was eerily quiet, save for the soft crackling of torches that cast long, dancing shadows across the worn floor. "I can't believe you, Lloyd," Anna hissed, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow managed to echo off the walls. "You just had to show off in alchemy, didn't you? Now look where it's got us." Her words were sharp, but I could hear the underlying fear in her voice. I touched at Lloyd, noting the way his shoulders slumped under the weight of Anna's disappointment. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a mix of guilt and defensiveness. Part of me wanted to defend him. After all, his intentions had been good, but I couldn't deny the mess we were in because of his actions. Lloyd shuffled his feet, the sound grating against the stone floor. "Come on, Anna," he pleaded, his eyes darting nervously between us. "I was just trying to impress Professor Stein. How was I supposed to know the potion would react like that?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying his own fear and regret. "Oh, I don't know," Anna shot back, her words dripping with sarcasm, maybe by actually reading the assignment instead of winging it. She paused, then added more softly. I wanted the harshness in her tone, but I understood where she was coming from. The tension between my two best friends was palpable, and I felt caught in the middle, unsure of how to diffuse the situation. "Guys," I started, my voice wavering slightly. I changed nervously around the dark hallway, my eyes scanning for any signs of onlookers or authority figures. "Maybe we should." But before I could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed from around the corner. We all froze, our hearts pounding in unison. I held my breath, hoping against hope that it wasn't a DC officer. Well, a smooth, arrogant voice cut through the silence. "What do we have here?" My heart sank, a cold dread washed over me. Of all the people to catch us out after curfew, it had to be Stefan and his cronies. I watched as he rounded the corner, flanked by two of his friends, their expressions a mix of smugness and curiosity. The commoner trio, Stefan drew lead, his eyes glinting with malice in the flickering torchlight. "Out for a midnight stroll?" His voice dripped with condescension, each word carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. I felt a surge of anger at his words, my fists clenching involuntarily at my sides. The constant jabs at our backgrounds never seemed to stop, no matter how well we performed in class. It was like a festering wound that Stefan and his cronies couldn't resist picking at. Anna, always the bravest of us, stepped forward. Her eyes blazed with a mix of fury and determination. "This has nothing to do with you, Stefan," she spat, her voice low and dangerous. "Just keep walking." I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself ready for a fight if it came to that. I admired Anna's courage, but my stomach churned with anxiety. This confrontation was the last thing we needed right now, not with the mess from the alchemy class still hanging over our heads. The girl behind Stefan, Alara, I think her name was, chimed in, her voice sickly sweet like poisoned honey. "Oh, but it seems like quite the show," she said, twirling a lock of her hair around her finger. "We wouldn't want to miss out on the entertainment now, would we?" Her eyes sparkled with malicious glee. Lloyd's jaw clenched, his frustration evident as he glared at the group. I could practically feel the heat of his anger radiating off him. "Mind your own business," he retorted, his tone laced with irritation. "I'm not in the mood for your antics." His hands were balled into fists, knuckles white with the effort of restraining himself. Stefan chuckled, the sound grating on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, touchy, Lloyd," he taunted, taking a step closer. His eyes narrowed, searching for any sign of weakness. "Just trying to enjoy the show." Anna stepped between Lloyd and Stefan. Her eyes blazed with defiance, her small frame somehow seeming to grow larger as she faced down our tormentor. "Back off, Stefan," she warned, her voice firm and unwavering. "We don't have time for your games." Alara smirked, a glint of mischief in her eyes as she sidled up next to Stefan. "But it's so much more fun when you're involved, Anna," she teased, her words laced with hidden barbs. Lloyd shot her a disapproving glare, which she pointedly ignored. Feeling the tension rise in the hallway like a tangible force, I tried to defuse the situation. My voice came out shakier than I intended, betraying my nerves. Come on, guys, let's not escalate things further. We should really head back before it gets too late. I glanced nervously between my friends and our tormentors, silently pleading for cooler heads to prevail. Stefan's grin morphed into a smirk as he leaned in closer, invading our personal space. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he remarked, "Oh, leaving so soon? What a shame. I was looking forward to more of this delightful drama." The mockery in his tone was unmistakable, each word carefully chosen to provoke a reaction. "Can't you just shut up?" Anna snapped, her patience finally shattering like thin ice. She took a menacing step towards Stefan, her fists clenched at her sides, ready to defend herself if necessary. The air crackled with tension, and I held my breath, afraid of what might happen next. Lloyd quickly placed a hand on Anna's shoulder, holding her back. "Anna, calm down," he said, his voice low but firm. "He's not worth it." I could see the internal struggle in Lloyd's eyes, the desire to lash out warring with the knowledge that we couldn't afford any more trouble tonight. "Who do you think you are, you commoners? Show respect to your masters," said the other boy, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. His voice dripped with arrogance, each syllable carefully enunciated to emphasize his perceived superiority. I felt a wave of disgust wash over me at his words. The casual cruelty of the nobility never ceased to amaze me, no matter how many times I encountered it. Lloyd's eyes narrowed at the comment, his jaw clenching visibly. I could almost feel the anger radiating off him as he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm nobody's servant," he growled. His eyes flashed with defiance as he continued, "Now, if you're interested in a little friendly competition, maybe we can arrange something. But as for showing off, I'm not in the mood for any of your games." Stefan and his companions exchanged surprised glances, clearly not expecting such a bold response from Lloyd. Alara smirked, stepping forward with a challenge in her eyes. "Oh, really?" she taunted, her voice laced with a hint of excitement. "You think you can handle us, commoner?" Her eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation. Anna, her patience clearly at its limit, shouted in annoyance, "Damn, do you want to fight?" Her hands were clenched into fists, her body tense and ready for action. The boy's face contorted with disdain, his sneer deepening. "You really don't know your place, you commoner," he spat. "I, Lenny Valdez, will show you your true place." His gaze then shifted to Anna and me, and I felt my blood run cold at the predatory gleam in his eyes. "After I finish with you, I will take these two girls to my home," he added, his tone laced with a lustful malice that sent shivers down my spine. Lloyd's voice cut through the oppressive atmosphere, sharp and filled with barely contained rage. "Listen here, you little shits. I've had enough of your crap. You want to fight? Fine. But remember, you started this." The underlying threat in his tone was palpable, promising violence if pushed any further. Lenny and Lloyd both drew their weapons, the steel blades gleaming ominously in the dim light. I sighed inwardly, exasperated by the familiar predicament we had found ourselves in. Why do we always end up in trouble? I wondered, bracing myself for the impending clash. Alara's laughter, shrill and mocking, echoed through the corridor. "Show him who's boss, Lenny. Put that commoner in his place." Her words dripped with malicious glee, further fueling the volatile tension in the air. I felt a deep sense of unease wash over me, knowing that this confrontation could have dire consequences. "We need to stop this before it escalates," I urged Anna, desperate to find a way to intervene and defuse the situation. But before we could make a move, the clash between Lloyd and Lenny intensified. Their weapons collided with a deafening clang that set my teeth on edge. The sound of metal meeting metal filled the air, sparks flying with each strike as they exchanged blows with increasing ferocity. As I watched the fight unfold, I noticed something unsettling about Lenny. His eyes had taken on a sinister red hue, the veins in his face bulging as if he were possessed by a dark energy. There's something wrong with him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, my brow furrowed with concern. Anna, her senses heightened, nodded in agreement, her grip tightening on her wand. "I see it too," she whispered back, her voice tense. The air crackled with an unnatural energy as the two boys continued their fierce confrontation, the clash of their weapons reverberating through the hallway. Lenny's movements were unnaturally quick and aggressive, fueled by a dark energy that seemed to twist and distort the very fabric of reality around him. As Lloyd deftly parried his strikes, a sense of foreboding crept over me. The mana emanating from Lenny was corrupt, tainted by a malevolent force that threatened to consume him from within. It was a chilling sight, one that sent a shiver down my spine as I realized the gravity of the situation we were facing. The air crackled with tension as Stefan's voice cut through the chaos, his tone dripping with boredom. I'm bored. Let's leave, Alara." His casual dismissal of the situation sent a wave of irritation through me. I clenched my fists, thinking, how can he be so nonchalant about all this? Alara's lips curled into a sickly sweet smile as she latched onto Stefan's arm. "Hi," she cooed, her eyes gleaming with a mix of adoration and malice. The sight made my stomach turn. Anna's voice rang out, filled with righteous anger. "Wait, if you're leaving, stop your subordinate and take him with you." She pointed an accusing finger at Lenny, her face flushed with frustration. Stefan turned, his expression one of utter indifference. "I have no business with what he does," he shrugged, his eyes cold and uncaring. "He's the one who decided to attack you, and I didn't order him to do anything, so that's not my problem." As Stefan sauntered away with Alara, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Sure, we had 2 less opponents to worry about, but Stefan's indifference was chilling. "Damn you," Anna shouted, her voice echoing off the stone walls. Her fists clenched at her sides, trembling with suppressed rage. "TCH, I swear I'll take that arrogant face off him one day." I grabbed Anna's shirt, my heart racing with a mix of fear and urgency. Anna," I whispered, "I don't think we have time to care about Stefan right now." My eyes darted nervously to the shadows around us. What do you mean?" Anna's gaze followed mine, realization dawning on her face. Her eyes widened as she understood, her body tensing as she turned her attention forward. "What, do you guys want to fight too?" Her eyes narrowed dangerously, her stance shifting as she prepared for battle. From the shadows emerged 3 cloaked figures, their faces hidden behind dark hoods. The air grew thick with tension as Anna and I faced off against these mysterious newcomers. Their silence was unnerving, the shadows cast by their hoods masking any hint of expression or emotion. "Let's make this quick," Anna said, her voice low and focused. Without hesitation, she made the first move, casting a spell that sent a powerful wave of water hurtling towards one of the cloaked figures. As the spell illuminated the corridor with a blue glow, I couldn't help but admire Anna's quick thinking and power. The rush of water was deafening in the enclosed space, and I braced myself for the inevitable counterattack. To our surprise, the cloaked figures managed to evade our attacks with startling agility, responding with a combined assault of fire and wind. "Watch out!" I yelled, quickly conjuring a wind barrier to shield Anna and myself from the incoming onslaught. The heat of the flames licked at the edges of my protective shield, and I gritted my teeth with the effort of maintaining it. "Thanks," Anna said, flashing me a quick smile. "Now it's our turn." Once the fire dissipated, Anna launched a barrage of water balls, each one infused with her mana and crackling with power, caused one of them to fall. Simultaneously, I increased the gravity around the cloaked figures, causing them to stumble and fall to the ground, their movements hindered by the increased weight. "Nice one," Anna cheered, taking advantage of their compromised state. With a swift movement, she incapacitated one of the cloaked figures with a stunning spell, leaving only one standing. Once the fire dissipated, Anna launched a barrage of water balls, each one infused with her mana and crackling with power. Simultaneously, I increased the gravity around the cloaked figures, causing them to stumble and fall to the ground, their movements hindered by the increased weight. I looked at Lloyd, who nodded quickly before turning his gaze back to Lenny, his focus unbroken. As I watched Lloyd's effortless movements, it became clear that his dueling skills were on another level. Even Kyle and Kyla, who were renowned for their prowess, were no match for Lloyd's mastery. It was no wonder that he had been praised by Rimuru as a genius, his technique and execution flawless as he deftly evaded Lenny's increasingly desperate attacks. Is it just that?" Anna cried out, her voice laced with a tinge of frustration. Her purple eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, now flashed with a storm of emotions, disappointment, irritation. Her delicate features twisted into a scowl as she surveyed our fallen opponents. I could feel the waves of disappointment radiating from her. Anna's fingers twitched, itching for more action, more challenge. She nudged one of the cloaked figures with her boot, the leather creaking in the sudden silence. When the figure remained motionless, Anna's shoulders slumped, her earlier excitement deflating like a punctured balloon. "TCH, what a waste of time," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper but laden with frustration. Her gaze darted to where Lloyd and Lenny were still locked in combat. I stepped closer, the stone floor cold beneath my feet, and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Well, at least we handled them swiftly," I said softly, trying to inject some positivity into my voice. "Not every encounter can be a grand showdown, Anna." Anna's eyes met mine, a whirlpool of emotions swirling in their depths. She let out a sigh that seemed to come from her very soul, her body relaxing slightly under my touch. "I suppose you're right," she conceded, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. "Still, I was hoping for a bit more excitement, you know." I couldn't help but chuckle, the sound echoing off the stone walls. "Always craving thrills, aren't you?" I teased, earning a playful nudge from her. Our attention was drawn back to the ongoing battle. Lenny's movements had grown frantic, his attacks becoming wild and unpredictable. He lunged at Lloyd, his sword whistling through the air in a deadly arc. Lloyd, in contrast, moved with fluid grace, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground as he dodged each strike. The clash of steel on steel rang out, sparks flying as their blades met in a furious dance. Lenny's face was contorted with rage and exertion, sweat beading on his brow. Lloyd, however, remained eerily calm, his eyes focused and calculating. In a breathtaking display of skill, Lloyd feinted left, drawing Lenny's guard down. Then, in a movement so fast it was almost unseen, he spun, causing the hilt of his sword to collide with Lenny's temple, followed by a punch to the stomach. Lenny fell to the ground like a puppet with strings cut, defeated. Lloyd sheathed his sword with a practiced motion, the scrape of metal against leather loud in the sudden quiet. His eyes, cold and indifferent, regarded the fallen Lenny. "I believe our business here is concluded, noble Lenny," he remarked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's go," Lloyd commanded, his tone brooking no argument. As we fell into step behind him, the air suddenly thickened, charged with an ominous energy. The torches flickered wildly, casting frantic shadows across the walls. Lenny's voice, filled with a desperate defiance, rang out. "Do you think you can just leave like that?" He struggled to his feet, one hand clutching his stomach, the other clenched in a white-knuckled fist. "You're just a commoner. Don't get too carried away." The air in the dimly lit chamber suddenly grew thick and oppressive, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out in an instant. A chill ran down my spine as I felt the surge of dark mana emanating from Lenny. It was like an invisible, malevolent fog seeping into every corner of the room. Lenny's eyes, once filled with anger and frustration, now widened to an alarming degree. The whites of his eyes seemed to glow in the flickering torchlight, and within them, a glint of pure malice danced like a twisted flame. His lips curled into a snarl, revealing teeth that seemed unnaturally sharp. In a blur of motion that defied human capabilities, Lenny launched himself at us. The stone floor cracked beneath his feet as he propelled himself forward, his body becoming little more than a shadowy streak. The air crackled with dark energy, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. My heart leapt into my throat, and I barely had time to brace myself for impact. Anna tensed beside me, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. Lloyd's eyes narrowed, his body coiling like a spring, ready to counter. But before any of us could react, the very air in front of us shimmered and distorted. In the blink of an eye, a massive wave of water materialized out of thin air. It was as if a piece of the ocean had been plucked from its bed and dropped into our midst. The water surged forward with unstoppable force, enveloping Lenny mid-leap. It swirled around him, forming a perfect sphere that trapped him at its center. The watery prison was a marvel to behold. Crystal clear yet constantly in motion, like a living thing. Lenny's features were distorted by the shifting water, making him look almost inhuman. His mouth opened in what must have been a scream, but only bubbles escaped his lips. His limbs thrashed wildly, but the water refused to yield. It was like watching a bizarre underwater dance, equal parts fascinating and terrifying. As one, we turned towards the source of this unexpected salvation. There stood Lily, her wand outstretched and glowing with a soft blue light. Her face was a mask of fierce determination, brows furrowed in concentration. The air around her seemed to shimmer, residual magic dancing like heat waves. Next to her was Rimuru. His posture was deceptively relaxed. His hands were clasped behind his back, but there was a tension in his shoulders that betrayed his readiness for action. His eyes, usually warm and friendly, held now a calculating gleam as they swept over the scene. Lily hurried towards us, her long brown hair streaming behind her like a banner. As she drew closer, I could see the worry etched in the lines of her face, the concern evident in her eyes as they darted from one of us to another. "Are you all okay?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. She reached out, her hands hovering over us as if checking for invisible injuries. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, my racing heart began to slow. "We're fine, thanks for your timely intervention," I said, my voice a bit shaky. I offered Lily a grateful smile, which she returned, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Anna had already turned her attention back to Lenny. Her earlier frustration had given way to a smirk of satisfaction as she watched him struggle. "Looks like you won't be causing any more trouble for now," she remarked, a hint of smugness in her tone. Rimuru's calm voice cuts through the tension. "So, can you tell me what happened? Why did they attack you?" His eyes, sharp and observant, moved from one of us to another, seeking answers. Lloyd stepped forward, his usual composure slightly ruffled. "We were just thinking our own business when they ambushed us," he explained, his gaze flickering towards the restrained Lenny. A hint of confusion colored his voice as he added, "Thank you for the help, Lily. We're grateful for your timely intervention." Lily's posture is visibly relaxed, a small smile gracing her features. The worry lines on her forehead smoothed out as she replied, "Of course. I'm just relieved you're all safe." Rimuru nodded thoughtfully, his gaze turning back to the captive Lenny. The water sphere continued to swirl. Lenny's muffled cry barely audible through the magical barrier. "Well, I think it's time we get some answers," Rimuru said, his voice carrying a note of resolution. "Let's see what our friend here has to say for himself." "Lily," he said, his voice quiet but authoritative. With just that single word, a wealth of unspoken communication passed between them. Lily nodded, her face a mask of concentration. She raised her wand, its tip glowing with a soft blue light. With a graceful flick of her wrist, the watery prison surrounding Lenny began to shimmer and dissolve. The liquid cascaded to the floor, forming puddles that reflected the flickering torchlight. Lenny crashed to the ground with a dull thud, his sodden clothes making a wet slapping sound against the stone. He immediately began coughing and spluttering, desperately gulping in air. His chest heaved erratically, and his eyes were wide with panic and disorientation. Water dripped from his hair and clothes, forming a small pool around him. Before Lenny could even think about moving, Rimuru was there. In one fluid motion, he planted his foot firmly on Lenny's back, pinning him to the cold, damp floor. The sudden pressure forced a pained grunt from Lenny's lips. "So, could you explain to us what happened, noble sir?" Rimuru's voice was honey-sweet, but there was an unmistakable edge of steel beneath the politeness. His eyes, usually warm and friendly, had turned cold and sharp as ice picks. Despite his precarious position, Lenny's face contorted into a defiant sneer. His lips curled back, revealing teeth clenched in a mixture of pain and stubborn pride. "HMPH. As if I would," he began, his voice raspy from the water. Rimuru didn't let him finish. With a slight shift of his weight, he increased the pressure on Lenny's back. The man's words cut off abruptly, replaced by a strangled gasp of pain. "Don't you know the situation you're in, kid?" Rimuru's voice had lost all pretense of politeness now. It was hard and unyielding as the stone floor beneath them. The muscles in his leg flexed visibly as he applied even more force. "You're outnumbered and outmatched. The sooner you cooperate, the better it will be for you." Lenny continued to struggle, his face a mask of agony. His fingers clawed at the stone floor, leaving faint scratches as he tried to find purchase. But despite the pain etched into every line of his face, there was still a spark of defiance in his eyes. His jaw was set, teeth gritted against the pain, refusing to give in. Rimuru's frown deepened, lines of frustration etching themselves across his forehead. His foot shifted again, ready to increase the pressure even further. But before he could, Lily stepped forward. Her movements were graceful yet purposeful as she placed a gentle hand on Rimuru's arm. The touch was light, but it carried the weight of silent communication. "I think we should go somewhere else before interrogating him," Lily suggested. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried a quiet strength that filled the chamber. Her eyes met Rimuru's gaze steadily. Rimuru held her gaze for a long moment, the tension in the air palpable. Then, slowly, he exhaled. The sound was heavy with frustration, but when he nodded, some of the anger seemed to drain from his posture. In one swift, almost casual movement, Rimuru brought his foot up and then down again, striking Lenny precisely at the base of his skull. The impact made a dull thud that echoed in the chamber. Lenny's body went instantly limp, all the fight draining out of him in an instant. His eyes rolled back, and his head lolled to the side, a small trickle of drool escaping from the corner of his mouth. The sudden silence that fell over the chamber was deafening. The only sounds were the soft dripping of water from Lenny's clothes and our own slight breathing. Rimuru's piercing gaze swept methodically over the three motionless figures sprawled on the cold, unforgiving stone floor. Their discarded masks lay nearby, like abandoned shells, revealing faces that stirred a sense of déjà vu in all of us. Anna's sharp intake of breath shattered the silence like a thunderclap. "Wait a sec." Her violet eyes widened with sudden recognition, her slender arm shooting out to point at one of the unconscious boys. "I know that guy," she exclaimed, her voice bouncing off the walls in an eerie echo. "He's the one Lloyd beat in that class competition last semester. Man, he's been nursing a grudge against Lloyd ever since." Anna's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lloyd squinted at the face in question, his brow furrowing in concentration. A flicker of recognition passed over his features, softening his usually stoic expression. "Oh yeah," he murmured, absently running a hand through his messy hair. The gesture betrayed his uncertainty, a rare crack in his composed facade. There was such a guy. Rimuru's eyebrow arched with curiosity, his gaze shifting to the boy Anna had pointed out. His voice, tinged with intrigue, cut through the tense atmosphere. "And what is this boy's name?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer. Lloyd's frown deepened as he racked his brain. The pressure of everyone's expectant stares seemed to weigh on him, causing him to hesitate. "Let me think," he started, his voice trailing off uncertainly. "It was Greg, or maybe it was Mark. No, wait, I'm pretty sure it was Greg." "Here," I interjected, my voice steady despite the unease growing in my gut. All eyes turned to me, a mixture of surprise and curiosity on their faces. "His name is Pierre. But something's different about him." I paused, studying the boy's core intently. The magical energy emanating from him felt off. Wrong, somehow. A week ago, he was definitely in the solid red stage. Now, he's solid orange stage. That's quite a jump. It doesn't make sense. Lily, who had been observing quietly from the sidelines, suddenly noticed a change in Rimuru's demeanor. His usually carefree expression had hardened, his eyes narrowing as they darted between the three unconscious figures. A shadow seemed to pass over his face, as if he'd realized something troubling. "Rimuru?" Lily asked softly, her voice laced with concern. Her gentle inquiry seemed to snap Rimuru out of his thoughts. Rimuru straightened up, his face smoothing over as he met Lily's worried gaze. "It's nothing," he said, though there was a hint of unease in his voice that belied his words. "Let's get these individuals to a safe location and question them further." With a collective nod of agreement, we set about binding the three masked figures. The ropes were coarse and sturdy, biting into their skin as we secured their hands and feet. The task was completed in tense silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts about what this all could mean. "By the way, what were you two doing out so late?" Anna's voice cut through the tension, a mischievous glint dancing in her emerald eyes. She waggled her eyebrows suggestively, her lips curving into a teasing smirk. Lily's hazel eyes narrowed, her long chestnut hair swishing as she tossed it over her shoulder with a huff. Her voice took on that stern, almost motherly tone that never failed to make Anna feel like a kid caught red-handed. "Hold up, Missy. I could ask you the same thing. You know there's a curfew now, right?" She crossed her arms, her stance radiating disapproval. Anna's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and indignation. She started talking so fast her words practically tripped over each other. It was because of Lloyd. She jabbed her finger at the boy, her bracelets jangling loudly with the sudden movement. In her mind, she was already planning her revenge on Lloyd for getting us into trouble. Again. Lloyd's eyes widened, his hands shooting up in surrender as if facing off against the magical police. Whoa, whoa. It wasn't on purpose, he protested, his mind racing to find an escape route from this predicament. Just a little oopsie, you know? He offered a weak, lopsided grin, hoping to defuse the situation. Anna's eyes rolled dramatically, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, right. Just like all your other, little oopsie. She air-quoted the words, her bracelets catching the dim light. Lloyd's posture stiffened, his jaw clenching as he crossed his arms tightly across his chest. A mix of guilt and defensiveness swirled in his gut. You talk like you didn't do anything wrong, he shot back, his voice tight with frustration. Sensing the rising tension, Rimuru stepped in, his hands raised in a placating gesture. His voice was steady and reassuring, like a calm breeze cutting through a storm. Okay. Enough with the arguments. He turned to Anna, his expression softening. To answer your question, Anna, we were taking a little walk around the academy, until we felt some fluctuations in the mana, so we came to check it out. Anna's frown vanished in an instant, replaced by a mischievous smirk that stretched from ear to ear. She sidled up to Lily, giving her a playful elbow nudge that made the other girl stumble slightly. Ooh, a late-night walk, just the two of you, she sing-songed, her imagination clearly running wild with romantic scenarios. Lily's face bloomed an even deeper shade of red. She looked away, her long hair swishing with the movement, desperately hoping it would hide her blush. It was just a walk. Nothing more, she mumbled, her voice slightly muffled by the curtain of her hair. Rimuru couldn't help but chuckle at the playful banter. He watched as Lily's shyness increased, her body language screaming discomfort. Despite the earlier tension, he found himself enjoying this lighthearted moment. Still, seeing Lily's distress, he decided to steer the conversation in a different direction. He cleared his throat, ready to change the subject and spare Lily further embarrassment. Okay guys, you can leave now. We'll take care of it, Rimuru said, his voice calm but authoritative. We'd just arrived at the joint meeting room of the student council and the disciplinary committee. The heavy oak doors loomed before us, firmly shut. A faint, flickering light seeped through the cracks, casting an eerie glow in the shadowy hallway. I glanced at Anna and Lloyd, trying to gauge their reactions. Anna's eyes were wide, a mix of excitement and nervousness dancing in her purple irises. Lloyd, on the other hand, had his trademark poker face on, but I noticed his fingers twitching slightly, a sure sign he was on edge. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the empty corridor. The sharp clack of heels against polished marble grew louder, bouncing off the stone walls. We all turned to look as Claire, Rimuru's deputy, rounded the corner. Her long, fiery red hair streamed behind her like a banner as she jogged towards us. Looks like the cavalry's arrived, Lloyd muttered under his breath, his attempt at humor falling flat in the tense atmosphere. Claire skidded to a halt, her usually pristine disciplinary committee uniform slightly rumpled. Her eyes darted between us, the bound figures on the floor, and Rimuru's grim expression. Captain, what's going on? Claire asked, her voice tinged with concern. Her eyes lingered for a moment on the three bound figures lying on the cold, marble floor, their clothes disheveled and faces slightly bruised. Are those students? Rimuru nodded, the grim look in his eyes sending a chill down my spine. Yeah, we've got a situation. I'll fill you in once we're inside. He turned to us, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sorry, guys. This is DC business now, but I appreciate your help tonight. Anna's purple eyes were practically sparkling with curiosity. She opened her mouth, probably ready to fire off a dozen questions, but Lloyd reached out and gently grabbed her arm. Come on, he said softly but firmly. Let's not push our luck. We're already out past curfew. Anna's face fell, disappointment clear in her expression. But we helped catch them. Don't we deserve to know what's going on? I felt torn. Part of me agreed with Anna. We'd risked a lot tonight, and my curiosity was burning. But another part of me, the part that valued self-preservation, knew Lloyd was right. Anna, I said gently, I think Lloyd's right, we should go. Anna looked at me, betrayal flashing in her eyes for a moment before resignation set in. Fine, she sighed dramatically. But this isn't over. We're getting answers tomorrow. one way or another. As we turned to leave, Lily caught my eye. "Be careful on your way back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The worry in her hazel eyes was clear as day. "And maybe don't mention this to anyone just yet?" We all nodded, the weight of the situation sinking in. Whatever was going on, it was big, and keeping quiet was crucial. We were just about to turn the corner when Rimuru's voice stopped us. "Oh, and Lloyd?" Lloyd tensed up like he'd been hit with a freezing spell. I could almost see the gears in his head turning, probably wondering if he'd been caught in one of his many pranks. "Yeah?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. To our surprise, Rimuru's face broke into a grin, a playful glint in his eyes. "Try not to cause any more accidents, all right?" Lloyd's face turned as red as a tomato. Anna and I couldn't help but giggle, the tension in the air momentarily lifting. As we made our way back to our dorms, the usually noisy halls were dead quiet. Our footsteps echoed off the walls, sounding way too loud in the silence. Moonlight poured through the tall windows, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for us. The familiar corridors felt different, almost spooky without the usual chatter of students. Anna was the first to break the silence. "So, anyone else feeling like we just stepped into something way bigger than we thought?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, like she was afraid of waking up the shadows around us. I nodded, reminded the weird surge of mana I'd felt earlier. "Just thinking about it makes me shiver." "Yeah, something's definitely up. But what?" I rubbed my arms, suddenly feeling cold despite the warm air. Lloyd, usually ready with a joke or a prank, looked deep in thought. His brow was all scrunched up, like he was trying to solve a really tough puzzle. "I don't know, but did you see how serious Rimuru looked? I've never seen him like that before." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "Whatever it is, it can't be good. Do you think we should tell Seal or Sylvia?" Lloyd shook his head. "Lily asked us to keep quiet, remember? We should trust them. For now, at least." We reached the point where we had to split up to our separate dorms. As we said our goodnights, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow was going to bring some big changes. If only I knew just how right I was.